Welcome to Morningstar. I'm Larissa Fernand, and this is part of a series where we look beyond the numbers at the money mindset of seasoned asset managers. Today with me is Raunak Onkar, who's a fund manager at PPFAS Mutual Fund.
Thank you, Larissa, for having me, and thank you, Morningstar, for the opportunity.
Most welcome. So, Raunak, let me start by asking you something about your upbringing. How has your family has shaped your money, your investing mindset? How have they influenced you?
I think the biggest influence on me has not been the investment principles or how to invest money, but most important influence has been the idea of frugality and minding your expenses before you spend money. So, of course, you have a set amount of money, income is limited. And we grew up in circumstances where it was important to be very frugal. So, that is one important, I think, lesson from my childhood, which I think has been with me and is guiding me even today. But we did not have a background in investing. So, although I am an equity fund manager today, we didn't have an equity background in the family. We hardly owned any shares. Most of the investments happened only through fixed deposits or fixed income products. So that's what my parents would understand. And the conversation around money was also very light. I mean, just informing, yeah, this is something that we are doing. That's it. It was not involved as to strategically how we are thinking, is there inflation, how the interest rate is going to grow, and all those things were never discussed. So, yeah, there was something wanting always in terms of understanding what other people are doing. And that part of my upbringing had to be developed later on. But I think the most important lesson I can draw today, even today, is the idea of frugality and not overspending beyond your means.
So, how comfortable are you with debt? Taking debt? Are you?
Reasonably comfortable, but it has to be asset backed. So, in my personal life, there is only one item of debt which I have, which is the mortgage of my home. Apart from that, I am debt free. So, that is also a calculated wager that you know that you want to live in this house for a very long period of time. And the neighborhood is something I wanted to live in for a long period of time. And it worked out in a way I could borrow money against my income for that.
So, Ronak, your responsibilities have changed over the years. So, you joined Parag Parikh's PMS just as an intern. Then
Yeah.
you joined the research department. You headed research, a fund manager. So, how has your investing idea of investing evolved over this time?
I think I was very lucky when I bought a break in PPFS. I became an intern right at the peak of the global financial crisis and really had no clue what was going to happen in the equity markets because everywhere you would hear people losing their jobs. There is no opportunities anywhere. The market is shrinking in terms of number of people working in the market. And also people have lost money because this was quite brutal for many people who had started investing for the first time on the back of the boom just a couple of years before that. For me, it was a very new experience. At the same time, I also was afraid whether I would be able to perform or not, what my role should be. And I wanted only one thing to do is to understand how to invest and how a firm like EPFS practiced value investing. That is something I was very keen on learning. And I was lucky to get the opportunity. But right from that day, I think once you start on a very lucky break, then you just have to keep on snowballing from there. So one thing led to another, met different people. Parag Bhai, Rajiv, Neil were also good influences in terms of getting the right direction and sticking to our guns. So once we knew what is the right way of investing, according to us, we thought that it is important to understand how that can be expanded over a period of time. So I'll give you an example where when I started off, the whole idea was because I started reading Ben Graham. That's how my starting journey was. It seemed more like finding statistical opportunities, that whatever is statistically looking cheap is the better opportunity. And it took an evolution of reading, learning, talking to people, observing other people's behavior, observing Parag Bhai, Rajiv, and how they invested. That led me to understand that there's a different way of looking at the statistical value investing, but also a qualitative aspect has to be added to that. Some of these changes were gradual over a period of time. As I have grown over the past 15, 16 years, I've realized that this is another way of looking at the same opportunity or value that we see in companies or businesses.
Then, how has your understanding of risk evolved? You experience a GFC, you experience a pandemic downturn. How do you view risk?
So in the beginning, I think it was more theoretical, and my understanding was very static about risk. So what I felt in the beginning was risk is something where uh, it happens either or. So it's like a final thing where you know that you wanted some money at this point in time, it is not available to you, and then that is the risk that you've taken in terms of your investments or savings. But over a period of time, I've realized that risk is actually a very qualitative and a long drawn thing. It's not something very finite. Let me explain that. So when you realize that risk is not final, what does that mean? It means that over a period of time, you will constantly have as an investor different cash flow needs that are coming up, and you will choose an investment vehicle accordingly. Now in equity, the risk profile is a little long drawn. The risk can be of two ways in equity. One is the cost of investing and making a mistake where you lose money, and the other one is the cost of not making the investment and losing the opportunity. So these two kinds of risks, I think, became distinct in my head. Otherwise, I had no idea of an opportunity cost of not investing over a period of time, because we have inflation eating into our returns. We have a personal inflation of expenses that also eats into our returns. All those things were not part of my framework. And over a period of time, I picked up on these things, that this is a slightly gray area of risk rather than a very binary way of looking at risk, that either you have money or don't have money. I think that is the only way I have evolved. And it's actually a good guide for many investors also.
I want to go back to my earlier question on how you've evolved as an investor. Can you share with me some investing principle that you really hold dear, that you've not wavered about at all?
So again, here I would like to refer my lucky starting point, where if I had not chanced upon reading about Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger or Benjamin Graham, my whole idea of investing wouldn't have been long-term oriented. So I would say I was a little biased in the beginning in terms of long-term investing, and the firm I'm working with also practices it on a day-to-day basis of long-term investing. This one principle, I think I may not let go at all in terms of having a long term view of things, rather than looking at what happens next quarter or next week or next month, or what is happening in the world today and how it affects everything today. That mindset of having a today outlook or a short term outlook changes the way you behave, and it constantly keeps you anxious and worried about what's going to happen today. But of course, we have to acknowledge that over a long period of time, things do change, and the job of an investor or a good analyst is to understand how things are changing and how it affects the companies or businesses you track or you own in the portfolio. So that is one thing, I think, a principle I will hold dear, is to think only long term rather than breaking it into shorter compartments of data points. Just have a long term focus, try and see how long term things can change. And that, I think, will be okay, I think, from a learning point of view for me.
You speak a lot of people who've influenced you. You've named quite a few. So going ahead, who do you want to emulate for the next leg of your career or your journey?
I think emulation is a very dangerous thing. I would not emulate anyone or want to emulate anyone. It's also a very bad goal to have, according to me. I think I've
Very
learned a
bad
lot from
goal.
everyone. Yeah, it's a very bad goal because I've learned a lot from everyone. But I've also learned one more important thing is people are different, and the context from which they come are different. The kind of risk appetites they have are different, and sometimes they may not be even able to articulate how they think about all these aspects. It may be very intrinsic to their personality, and that is something you cannot articulate. Then how can you learn and emulate from that? So you can always learn about different investors, what they did in different scenarios. You can get an idea from somebody saying that, okay, in this particular macro event somebody behaved in a particular manner, and that helped them in a particular way. But that doesn't mean the same event will happen again, or you will be able to act in the exact same way, because your psychology is different from that person's psychology. So learning principles from other people as to how they think, how they invest, and understand how they operate is a good way of learning things. But emulation can be very dangerous. And let me give an example over here. So most people know about Warren Buffett as an investor, but very few people I know have actually read a very wonderful biography on Mr. Buffett called The Snowball. And Snowball has a very interesting first quarter of the book, which is about his upbringing and as a child, how Buffett was and how he used to study stocks from very early days and how he was enterprising right from a very early age. Those are very hard things to replicate for most people, and most people wouldn't have lived that life. So one would say that, okay, I have learned from Buffett's letters, Buffett's teachings, and his videos. I've seen everything. I've listened to all the AGM videos and transcripts of Buffett, and now I can think like Buffett and invest like Buffett. I think it's a fool's dream. You can always learn from what Buffett has said, but in the end, you cannot emulate how he thinks. You cannot emulate the network of people he has around him. You cannot emulate the knowledge that he has compounded over the past several decades of operating. I mean, now he's 93 yesterday. So he has had almost a 80 plus year run in terms of learning and studying businesses. That is difficult to replicate or even emulate. So if you have that goal, you will constantly be anxious as to trying to emulate the next best thing or whatever catches our fancy. But if you just try and develop yourself by learning from others and then being conscious and self-aware as to what you can do, what you can learn from your own experience, that I think sticks and is very strong as a conviction you can build around your own behavior.
Thanks. That's very nicely explained. Okay, you speak of being conscious and self-aware. Tell me about an investing bias you have that you're very aware of and you have successfully combated it.
Yeah, so I think there are several biases that I personally have, but one I will give you. This is a two-part answer. One is a bias which I have combated successfully, and I think I have good handle on it now. And the other one which I constantly struggle with, and I need other people's help to help me with that bias. So the first bias I would like to mention is the hindsight bias, and it's a very easy bias to fall a trap into. Again, it's something where you may have never thought about an event occurring, but in the future that event happens, and you suddenly somehow connect your own thoughts. We don't know how memory works, so we connect in our mind that, oh, I had thought about this, that maine bola tha effect at some place where I had seen that, oh, this is something I had thought about a long time back and this has now actually happened, although there is no evidence in reality whether you have actually thought about it or acted on it. So the only evidence you have is what is in your portfolio at any given point and how you acted in the past when the information was there. And the second evidence is if you've written something down, the date, saying that, okay, this is the time at which I was thinking about this. So I've started doing that over a period of time where I take notes about whatever investment decisions I make or whatever investment ideas I might have and just note them down somewhere, saying that, okay, now at this point in time, my thought about this company or this sector is so and so. And in the future, if something on the contrary happens or something in the same direction happens, I can have a reference point in the back that, okay, this is not hindsight I'm talking about. This is something I had actually thought about, and this is the risk I had assessed, and this is a opportunity I had viewed, and now it's played out, or now it has happened in the reality. So if you write things down with dates, it's very hard to lie to yourself, and we are the easiest person to lie to when we're talking about ourselves. So that one bias, I think, can be very easily solved, but it's not very easy to keep taking notes every time. So if you can devote a few hours in the day, not few hours also, say half an hour in the day, to just take down notes and jot down whatever you're thinking about any company you come across during that period. It really helps to eliminate this hindsight bias quite effectively. And it's a 0 to 100 kind of a change. It suddenly changes your perspective looking at how you have also thought. So sometimes I go back to notes which are 5 years old and I realize, oh, I was such an idiot to think in such naive terms. And now when I see those things playing out, I say, okay, I had not thought about these things, but some things have played out. So I was not entirely naive. So you also gain confidence from your own thought process and you see your own progress as you go. And it need not be an essay. It can be just 2, 3 lines or whatever you think about something. So I think that really helped in eliminating the hindsight bias. And the other bias which I still struggle with, and I think it's very hard to eliminate completely, is the confirmation bias. And readers of Morningstar would have also read about this bias when you have written about it in the past. But this is a very nasty bias where we want to believe what we want to believe. And no matter what facts are in front of us, we will only pick and choose the facts that suit our argument or suit our prior held beliefs. And here, this is where I think the environment in which you work in plays a very big difference. So I don't know if you're a Hollywood fan, but if you've seen the movie Departed, there's a dialogue by Jack Nicholson in the very beginning. He says that I don't want to be product of my environment. I want the environment to be product of me. But in reality, we cannot shape our environment. We are constantly being shaped by our environment, so we cannot avoid that or cannot escape that. And once you accept it, then you start working with smart people around you, and then you involve them in the decision making process. Okay, this is what I am thinking about a particular idea. This is data points I have discussed or read, and do you verify that this information makes sense or not? And the moment you start bouncing off ideas with your team, you realize that, okay, now my confirmation bias is a little lower because somebody else can also weigh in with their experience. Somebody else can point out, hey, you have looked at this in this particular direction, but what about this? What if this happens? What if this scenario plays out? And then your mind starts to open up to possibilities which you may have previously ignored by complete accident. You would have just been having a blind spot to those risks or those opportunities. But if somebody else in your team points it out, it really helps. So I think in any healthy investment team, you will always see there is a debate and presentation of ideas to rest of the team, and people can then freely ask questions. So if you have that environment around you to really help you question yourself and don't take it personally, you just learn from all these questions. It really helps in curbing the bias, but not eliminating it completely. So I think, yeah, confirmation bias is the hardest to eliminate, and the easiest to eliminate has been so far the hindsight bias for me.
What intimidates you?
So again, my background has not been traditionally in finance. I have adopted this profession over a period of time. So when I started off, I was doing my bachelor's in IT, and somehow I wanted to do this, and I changed my track after my graduation. During the initial days, I always felt a little bit like an outsider. So many people around me were significantly smarter than me and had backgrounds in finance also. But if you talk to them, you realize that they know a lot in depth about finance, accounting, and all those things. So it used to intimidate me a lot, but it took a while of learning, studying, upgrading myself over a bit of time, constantly learning about different financial terms and other literature in finance. Also going through the CFA curriculum, all those things really help in the beginning. But it still intimidates me sometimes that, yeah, there are people who are much smarter than me who can break down ideas, investment principles, or business principles quite easily. And that's a great source of inspiration and learning for me. So it keeps me going also, that I also would want to learn how these people learn and pick up all these skills which are relevant from doing my job well.
And do you consider yourself a very lucky person?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
Getting the break in the beginning was itself luck, and also finding the right team, growing together with the team, and also learning with them, and generally being in a learning organization. So I think most people who are aware of PPFAS, we have been a learning organization, and one of the most important things we have done right since beginning, even before I had been here, is to share that knowledge very freely with everyone. So Parag Bhai used to write articles, and some of his articles even I had read when I was in college. I had not even realized I would be working with him someday, but it was amazing to have that as a coincidence in my life, that I would read his articles in Economic Times. Or even if you see books that he wrote, were quite pioneering in terms of introducing concepts like managing your behavior rather than just thinking about money and thinking about stocks as a single thing. So when you combine investing with your behavior, you really get a good idea of how your money can grow over a period of time, rather than being falling prey to all these short-term signals that you keep getting from the market. So those things that he shared, and eventually we put up these videos on YouTube. When we study different sectors, we talk to different people and we learn, and we just put these videos out of what we have learned. That actually compounds back a lot. When different people see them, they write to you, they talk to you, they point out your mistakes, they tell you, oh, haven't you seen this? This is also going to help you learn better in this direction. So constantly keep learning, and that over a period of time it compounds. So all these sources of learning as well as giving back knowledge, that compounds a lot. And I have been, I think, at the front seat of as a beneficiary to all these knowledge compounding activities that has happened around me. And also being around a team who acknowledges the long-term principles of investing, that really grounds you. That really tells you that, okay, you don't have to, you're not alone in this journey. You have people around you who are also thinking on the same lines, and you have to then bring meaningful ideas based on your experience, your sector expertise, and they will bring their ideas, and you can build a nice portfolio around these things.
So that's it then, Raunak. Thank you so much for your time. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Larissa.
Thanks for watching. This is Larissa from Morningstar.